Hey NAI football fans, Corey Thorpe here with another edition of the NAIFBALL podcast powered by AdCraft USA, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform experts. Our friends at AdCraft have been with us for many years now. They've run web stores for us multiple times. These guys are NAI fans and family who are experts in the apparel and merchandise world. AdCraft allows you to take the hassle out of ordering. Let their knowledgeable design and customer service staff handle everything from hosting the store online, shipping the product, and helping your customers so you can get back to the game. Find them online at adcraftusa.com. All right, NAI football fans, this is Corey Thorpe back with another edition of the NAIF Ball podcast powered by AdCraft Custom Apparel and Merch, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform expert since 1974. Grandview's got their web store open, at least as we're recording this. Got some good-looking stuff. Look, guys, you've got to look at them to get your merch together. They make it right. They do it right. They take it and take the parts that you don't want to deal with out of your hands and make it easy for you to deal with. Talk with them about getting a web store today. So, we are back, and we are almost there. 2 more conferences, including today, and we will get this party started the sooner. Talking Texas and Arkansas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma today. A lot fewer shenanigans at this level than there are at the overall college football level, but we still do have a couple of folks that are leaving and coming that we want to talk about. Lion is going D3 NCAA as of this year, and the Sooner has replaced them with Arkansas Baptist. You know, Matt, it's really a interesting section of the country because not only do you have Arkansas Baptist there, but you've also got an independent North American university, and then you've got John Melvin that should be coming online within a couple years.
Yeah, it's a really interesting build to the conference because when you think of the Sooner traditionally, very much Texas, throw some of the Arizona schools in there, like just this very Wild West feel to it. And you're expanding eastward, which I feel like is something that doesn't happen a lot with a lot of this realignment. I think it's an interesting move. Arkansas Baptist was originally JUCO, is that correct?
Yeah.
Which that's also another crazy jump because it's a completely different philosophy from junior college to the NAIA. So I'm very curious to see how this goes for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we see John Melvin coming online and getting their stuff going. North American's been playing for a couple years now. I think this will be, their third year playing football. And trying to confirm when they're going to be actually entering the Sooner. I think that's, obviously that's the best fit for them. They're over in, I believe, Houston. And John Melvin's in Louisiana, which really the Sooners the only conference that fits nicely. But you're going to be snuggling right up against having 2 bids before long with those kind of numbers coming in.
Yeah, definitely. It's something very strange to consider with this conference. I feel like I'm not prepared to have this conversation with the Sooner, but we're here. Like it is what it is now. So.
And starting at the bottom, because this is kind of a tale of 2 conferences. Once you get to the middle, you start seeing the net yards per play start getting positive earlier than I've seen in any conference. A little preview of what's to come. But some of the other folks that are towards the bottom are definitely taking the brunt of it.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, you start out with Texas College, 96th of 98 teams, and SP Plus, 1-9 record, 1-8 in the conference last year. Had a decent offense, getting 4.78 yards per play, but when you have 6.09 yards per play on defense, that's not a recipe for success.
Yeah, that's going to be a toughie right there. I mean, anytime you're giving up that many yards per play, and given the Sooner is not known for its defense, but anytime you get over that 6 number, that's going to be a problem for you. You do return Terrell Hookfin, a 1,100-yard receiver for you a year ago, 13 touchdowns. And you've got nothing leaving in terms of your all Sooner. You've got a second-year head coach in, and so you maybe have a chance to get a little bit of a little bit of something going, putting a couple years together, maybe, and maybe we can be talking in a few years that Texas College is really starting to ramp up here.
Yeah, it's definitely the beginning of the building blocks for this program. They have enough coming back. Like, it's a good sign. It's a good sign that who you have as your leadership is at least implementing the right things and setting the groundwork for the future.
You've got a majority of your team coming back, whether that's quarterback Isaiah Sadler, running back Tardell Williams. We already mentioned Hookfin at wide receiver. Defensively, you've got defensive lineman Rudy Benavidez, linebacker Trevon Brown, and defensive back Andrew Pons coming back. That's going to lead your defense. And so you really do have a shot to put a little bit more together, and we'll see what happens here with Texas College. Now, we did reference them earlier, the JUCO newcomers, and we move on to them, the Arkansas Baptist Buffaloes. Again, that 6+ yards per play does them no favors, but they had such a tough road to hoe last year as an independent that you could almost excuse a little bit of the defense there, and honestly the offense too. I mean, they played Kansas Wesleyan, trying to pull up their schedule from last year. I believe they played SAGU. They played Bethel. They played, they played LANGSTON. They played SAGU. They played Louisiana Christian. They played North American, Avila, Kansas Wesleyan. I mean,
it's pretty tough. That's a pretty tough situation to put yourself in.
It really, and as an independent, now, obviously in other sports, NAI independent, the AII or whatever it is that they're calling themselves now, I think they've got some new name for it, is a reasonable way to go in football. It's very difficult to do. And
yeah,
I think they're going to very much appreciate being in a conference with a conference schedule this year.
100%. And I think they have a lot to work with. Obviously, it's hard to get a feel for how they're actually going to do. But it's, from what it seems like, they're returning a lot of people. There was only one senior on the roster last year. So that's a good sign. Younger group. That's all we really know about them.
Yeah, unfortunately,
So.
the stats on Presto were not available for Arkansas Baptist, so not a lot we were able to tell. But you're talking about a former JUCO that is 2 years out of being a JUCO. You've got the recruiting coming in, and then you're not aging out an absolute ton. So definitely should be a young roster, and they've had the same coaching staff since even before they transitioned from being a JUCO. So you should be having a good coaching staff in place. Another thing to mention here, if I'm not wrong, I'm fairly certain that both Arkansas Baptist and I know Texas College are HBCUs. A lot of HBCUs in the Sooner, especially when you include LANGSTON in that mix. So, even if the on-field product isn't perfect for you, I feel like the halftime shows here are going to be all right.
Yeah, and it's cool to see that HBCU culture leak into other levels of play. I love that the NAI totally leans into it. It's fun to see.
Absolutely. Next up is WAYLAND Baptist. And they actually had a style guide. I actually got to pull the WAYLAND W out of their style guide. Thanks, WAYLAND, for doing that. They've got a new head coach in Marcus Henayos, promotion from defensive coordinator. So you've still got a little bit of familiarity there on your coaching staff.
Yeah, totally. And this was a team, that struggled last year, but offensively, obviously 65th in SP plus at 4.36 yards per play. Nothing to really scoff at there. Their defense was a bit lacking, but they obviously pulled off a couple wins last year. The pieces are in place for them. They do have some very key pieces leaving, though, and that's on the defensive side of the ball with defensive linemen uh, Manny Arguijo, excuse me,
We'll
and
take that.
linebacker Casey Buck, who were staples of that front seven.
Yeah, we'll take that. I mean, Buck was 86 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, 16 tackles for loss. I mean, that's a fair bit from a linebacker spot there. Um,
Yeah,
you know, and they are definitely returning some. They've got Andrew Villa coming back at linebacker, Harper Terry coming back on the defensive side. Offensively, Richard Ochoa, Brian Ponder, Damon Ford, and Willie Phillips are all returning. Phillips, the running back. Brian Ponder at quarterback is coming back, as well as Cameron Williams at wide receiver. So there are some pieces. However, it is definitely a minority of your defense that's returning. There's a little bit of turnover here for WAYLAND that we'll have to see if how long it's going to take for Coach Henios to really put his mark on this WAYLAND program.
totally. I'm excited to see how it goes for him.
And now turning to another team with a new head man here is going to be Oklahoma Panhandle State. New head coach Cory Miller from Minnesota State. I believe CTC is Community Technical College. Don't quote me on that. We just have community colleges down here, so CTC throws me off a little bit. But OPSU, with possibly one of the longer names in the NAIA, good season last year, approaching that 500 mark. We're only about a third of the way up, and we're already seeing our first positive net yards per play.
Yeah, this Oklahoma Panhandle State team was nothing to scoff at last year, and I think the same goes for this season. The key player they have returning is linebacker Cameron Dickinson, who is a staple of that defense. Unfortunately, they do have quite a few pieces leaving in wide receiver Jay Shone Brown, linebacker Daquan Charles, and DB Jaquavion Daniels, but still pretty good outlook for this roster, I think.
Yeah, they've added 16 transfers over the year. They have 5 starters back defensively and 5 of 6 offensive starters. Probably was a lot of their, where you're talking about offensively, the starters probably are the ones returning, and then you've got some of your depth pieces underneath leaving, because it does look like they're going to be losing a majority of their offense, returning a minority. And so you've got to find a way, if you're Cory Miller here, to put the pieces back together and see if you can put your stamp on this program without losing any ground back to the field.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's, with the transfers coming in, a lot to consider, obviously, for their new roster. And you have to question, too, like what kind of things about the team are actually going to change. Something to watch out for a OPSU team that I think is on the rise slowly but surely.
Absolutely. And we'll look at the top part of the Sooner here after these messages.
So you want to create and sell custom merch for your team or business. That's exciting, but where do you begin? How much inventory should you order? How do you distribute orders? AdCraft has your answers. Streamline the way you offer custom merch by utilizing our risk-free web store service. We ship directly to each customer, and we have the fastest turnaround in the game. Raise funds for your team or get merch to your employees and patrons. Contact AdCraft today, and let's bring your merch to life.
That is precisely what they do, the best in the business there at AdCraft. Get them to do your web store today. Get some great merch for your squad. Next up is going to be the last of the 3, I believe, HBCUs here, the LANGSTON Lions, who had a nice year offensively there. Anytime you're up around that 6 2/3 yards per play, you're pretty happy with what you've got. Unfortunately, the defense was a little lackluster for you.
Yeah, and this is the point, too, in the conference where we talk about that upper half. A lot of these teams that we're in contention, very much a tale of two sides of the coin for the conference. Langston was super competitive last year. Obviously, you mentioned that offense as a staple for them. Their defense also a couple times was able to get the job done. Obviously, a very Big 12 type of conference that you're looking at with the Sooner, with those defenses, but there's still a lot to work with there, I think, for Langston. Obviously, you have wide receiver Byron Hansford coming back, defensive line James Grace, and first team all conference defensive back Travis Martin coming back. Cannot be overstated how important it is to have those guys back for them.
Absolutely. Martin with 4 picks, Hansford with 588 and 6 from the wide receiver position, 20.3 yard average there. Basically an explosive play every time he touched the ball on average. And really, what you're losing is going to be a problem for you, because it's going to be Larry Harrington, who I feel like I've been talking about Larry Harrington for 40 forevers now as the quarterback for Langston, and good passer, good runner as well. Complimented Markel Scott there at running back, who is 769 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's going to be, those two pieces there are going to be tough ones for you as you try to move forward. Same with Keelan Ellison and Devin DeRusso. DeRusso, the first teamer at linebacker, 3 picks and a forced fumble, along with 56 tackles, and 9 of those for loss. 5 pass breakups from that linebacker position is very nice to have. And for Langston, you were young a couple years ago, and so now, is this going to be a little bit of a dip for you as it was a couple years ago, or are you going to be able to really bounce and have gotten the high school recruits like you need them to, in order to get back to where you want to be? I mean, when we started NAIAFBALL back in 2018, it was Langston in the field running the Sooner. At the top is where Langston wants to be, and they can be, but the rest of the league has gotten so much better that it's harder to win for Langston.
Totally. There's just still so much for them to work with, though. I think I'm curious to see how their defensive unit plugs into the rest of the conference next year with all their returning. Obviously, a lot of question marks surrounding the replacements on offense for such a high-flying, explosive unit that we'll be curious to see play out with some of these upper teams.
Next up is the team that I feel like is the most slept-on team in the Sooner, even by its own teams, and that is Louisiana Christian, one of the toughest places to play in the NAIA. Of course, it's a far trip for most folks to Pineville, Louisiana. The march from the visitors' locker room to the field is it's a long one. I've had coaches tell me it's about a mile from the dressing room to the field. That makes for a really tough environment. You're making your guys go a long way just to get to the field, and you got to do that after halftime too. But 31st in SP Plus for the Wildcats.
Yeah, and this is one of the few teams you can look at in this conference and say their defense is the highlight of their unit. Obviously, 24th with 4.23 yards per play, and an offense that's nothing to scoff at. And a big part of that offensive unit is tight end Jacob Ganote, who is coming back, first team all conference. They're also going to be returning offensive lineman Daniel Corville on that front unit. And on the other side of the ball, first team all conference defensive lineman Logan Bremer also returning with DB Benny Clark. Huge staples on all phases of the game for them. Huge to have back for an up-and-coming Louisiana Christian team.
Really one of the big pieces that isn't here on the list that I'm surprised didn't make it as a second teamer. I'm sure he's there as honorable mention, but his quarterback, Sal Palermo, who runs that offense, just does a great job of running it to perfection and keeps that running game going, a good runner as well as a passer. This is just a tough one to do. I mean, you don't want to go there. They've upset Langston, twice in the last 2 years. How much longer can you keep calling what they do an upset as they start to emerge? They just need to be a little more consistent, I think, in their play to emerge truly into the top half of the Sooner and to emerge as a legitimate Sooner Conference champion runner.
Totally. And I think you look at, like, even in the national picture, like, people aren't really talking about this team, which I just find so fascinating because the past few years they've really been building up to something special. Obviously, ending in the top half of the conference and being a statistical top 35 team in the country is extremely impressive. And with everybody they return on both sides of the ball, if there's a year for this squad to get it done and make that leap into the upper echelon of the conference and establish that, might be this season.
So they've got on offense everyone back aside from 3 offensive linemen and wide receiver Micah Dunn. On defense, they've got everybody back but Micah Latin, the defensive lineman who had 23 tackles for loss. I don't want to brush past that. 23 tackles for loss and 12 sacks is a whale of a campaign, even for a defensive lineman.
Totally. Yeah, that's insane.
This is a team that you can't sleep on. If you are in the Sooner, if you've got them even scheduled out of conference, you can't sleep on LCU because they've proven it. If you get sleepy against them, they will take advantage. Next up is the team from Waxahachie, the SAGU Lions, home of, I think, possibly the best game day broadcast in the NAI at the very least, and possibly for a couple of divisions higher. The folks over there at SAGU Sportsnet do a phenomenal job. Professional pregame show, getting folks in, getting outside opinions, being knowledgeable about what's going on outside of the Sooner, outside of SAGU, and their graphics are, bar none, some of the best in the NAIA. You can't talk about SAGU football without mentioning their team behind the team there in their sports network.
Yeah, it's good to see in the NAI there are still ways for these teams and these schools to put together some impressive media products. I know as the sport and lower levels of football get more accessible in the streaming world, it's always nice to see that. I always really enjoy that.
And they do a fantastic job. I loved watching them host the Victory Bowl last year because it's just another chance for us to see that and to get to watch a football game that's well put together. Your cameras are in the right spot. You're cutting to the right cameras. You can tell what the action is occurring. It's a well-produced game to watch. But on the field, you're talking about nearly a top 25 team. 28th offense, 39th defense, good for 26th in SP+. But, man, do they lose a ginormous piece of that offense, running back Keaton Dudek. Almost 1,600 rushing yards and almost 400 receiving yards, 17 total touchdowns between the two. The offense ran through Keaton Dudek.
Yeah, that's not really a guy you can replace just in one off season. And if you can, then don't know how you pulled that off.
Good on you,
extremely difficult to do. Like, that's a guy that you scheme things around for your system. Like, how does the offense going forward change? Like, what pieces do they have to have in place? How do they account for that in the run and pass game? It's a lot to consider. And some of the other names on this list of people that are leaving, obviously, wide receiver Zachary Johnson, center Evan Greathouse, defensive lineman Keandre Belcher, linebackers Chris Bacos and Demarius Heron, and punt returner and DB Jalen Moss. That's a lot to replace. And obviously SAGU coming off of a very good season last year, probably has some guys in the wings, but you can't account for everybody all at once, I don't think.
The nice part of that defense coming back is going to be Isaac Gowdy coming back for one last run, 6 interceptions and 10 pass breakups last year. Definitely anchored his side of the field there. But if you're going to trust anybody with being able to have the X's and O's to get SAGU where they wanted to go, it's definitely going to be someone like Greg Ellis, the Cowboy great. Not going too far from Dallas there to Waxahachie. Coaching now for SAGU, entering his second season. I mean, that man is he's seen a play or two in the game of football, I do believe.
Just a few. Yeah. Just a few.
So what do they have coming back then? It's about half the offense here. Briley Green at quarterback is really the big piece that we didn't already mention. Cupboard's pretty bare at running back that had stats. Now, do they have running backs on roster? Sure, absolutely. But when your starter is Keaton Dudick, you're going to ride that one until he can't no more. And then you got Paul Odidi, of course, coming back at wide receiver there with almost 1,000-yard season. Definitely gets overshadowed by Dudick there at wide receiver. And then you return a majority of your defense, which was a good defense. SAGU typically, historically has good defenses. And in a conference where there's not any, they are definitely one of the few outliers here. I feel like, and I always feel, honestly, like SAGU could definitely have a season where they could make life uncomfortable for the front runners for the conference.
I totally think so too. And I mean, you saw it last year. They did just that. Who's to say they don't keep that going?
Ooh, but you got to replace that running back. That's such a ooh, that's not one. Losing Keaton Dudick to SAGU is approximately the same magnitude to losing Joe Dolanchek for Morningside. You're talking about the same kind of weight there to your offense. It's can't be overstated. Now, a team that was definitely holding their breath on Selection Sunday, but just didn't quite make it. Texas Wesleyan. The Rams are definitely going to have a chip on their shoulder this year after a year in which they very much thought they were going to get into playoffs.
Yeah, and this was a team, too, that showed that they deserved a spot. I mean, the 7th-ranked offense in the entire country and a 51st-ranked defense, that was enough to get the job done most of the time. And of that unit, you're obviously returning Ernie Caesar, who was a huge part of what they got done with 1,300 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns. Like, just crazy production from that guy in that unit.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you look at Jason Price, the wide receiver, earns a first-team kick returner, second-team punt returner. You're talking about a guy who had 2 kick return and 2 punt return touchdowns. You've got that weapon there, even if he wasn't as used offensively. You've got 3 all-conference offensive linemen between Peter Svoboda. My Russian is apparently in need of work. Michael Bonner and Christian Myhan there on the offensive line. Also returning blocking tight end Cameron Chapman there. Really the big thing that you're losing if you're Tex West is quarterback Dalton Dale, who was very, very good last year. You do have Carson Rogers, who saw ample playing time last year when Dale was hurt. But Dale is a big piece to replace for you.
Totally. And some of the other pieces they have to replace, too, on the defensive side of the ball, all first conference guys, and Dylan Petway, Chance Carroll, and Vondres LaFrance. Huge parts of that defense that you have to replace now. And along with a punter, not easy to replace a leg in the NAIA.
Blazer with the 38.8 yard average with the longest 65 is definitely going to get the job done in the NAIA. That's going to be a tough one to replace. To me, the big thing about those 3, Petway, Carroll, and LaFrance, you're losing, let's see, that's 7 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 16 pass breakups. I mean, you're talking about 3 guys there who were game changers, whether they were giving the ball back to their 7th-ranked offense or whether they were making sure that they got to another play, for their defense.
Yeah, it's hard to replace those guys that just have a knack for the ball and know how to play and get after it and, just wreck games for you.
So let's see what they've got coming back. They have half their offense returning, majority of running backs, half their wide receivers, and half their quarterbacks. Of course, that's Dale versus Rogers there, and a majority of their defense. Majority of their linebackers come back. About half their defensive backs come back. Most of that D-line returns, and we know that games are won in the trenches. Could this be the year that Texas Wesleyan gets to the top of the Sooner? But they're going to have to unseat. Obviously, Arizona Christian leaves for the Frontier, so we only have one team left, and that's Ottawa. The Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 3-way tie last year between Ottawa, Texas Wesleyan, and Arizona Christian that got resolved with Arizona Christian's higher ranking. But it's been Ottawa in recent years that's had the better run of form. The program entering its 5th, 6th year, somewhere around there, less than 10 years. We talk about the Big 12-ish nature of this conference. You just had the 7th-ranked offense. Now you've got the 2nd.
Yeah.
I mean, stars.
I mean, super productive unit on offense. What can you really say about an offense that puts up 5.61 yards per play? That's just astonishing. And a key part of that offensive unit was obviously up front, and they bring back 2 of the key pieces of that front 5 on the offensive side of the ball in Zach Woltz and Harvey Gonzalez. Also some playmakers coming back for them on special teams with Roman Shagun and Landon Reeves returning for them as well. And first-team all-conference defensive back Eric Holman, who kept that 57th-ranked defense together for them.
Absolutely. So Hagen there at wide receiver / kick returner is going to be your top leading wide receiver coming back as well. You had a 1-year rental at quarterback from Kansas Wesleyan, Isaiah Randall, that replaced your system quarterback, your amazing system quarterback before Randall. Now you really do have to find a quarterback that's going to fit your system, and you've got a lot of huge pieces leaving here, whether that be Chris Ewens at running back, Devon Humphrey at wide receiver, Elijah Boyd-Velakis at offensive line, Tomerlin at linebacker, the first teamer, Seth Ham there on the defensive line, Brown Crenshaw there at defensive back, and Austin Bone with the bomb leg, 41.1 yards average, 70 on the long for Bone, getting it done for Ottawa. And this is going to be a very crucial year for Mike Nesbitt. Can everything he's built up in this program so far really come to fruition now that you've kind of moved through your first couple of recruiting classes that you were selling on a future?
Yeah, it's a lot of key pieces for them to replace. So it'll be interesting to see what they can get done. I think they still have the pieces in place to make it work. Obviously, you've proven that you can have a plug-and-play type quarterback in your system and have that sorted, which is great. Obviously, it doesn't put as much pressure on the quarterback for your entire unit to succeed. But there's still so many holes to fill. And I feel like for the top half of this conference, that's the conversation you're having.
And really, you do have to have a good quarterback here that understands what he's doing because you're running the air raid.
Yeah.
Air raid kind of puts an emphasis on the quarterback being able to read read stuff and making it happen. But I mean, don't sleep on Ottawa's running. Ottawa's
Yeah.
running game has always been a strong suit for them and something that they've been able to do. And they tell me that running is a very important part of the air raid. I take their word for it because they're a lot smarter than I am. But it's called the air raid.
Hey, you got to open up those holes somehow.
That
And
is
if
the
not,
thing.
the running game's going to be there anyways. So I could see it working in.
But man, very few on offense. You're talking about Carter Friedland is your returning quarterback. Did not get a ton of playing time last year. Tyrell Sturgis-Kofer, one of the few running backs returning, and a minority of your wide receivers headlined by Sahagan. A minority of your defense there. Giovanni White leads a minority of defensive linemen. Khalil Lewis leads a minority of linebackers, and then you've got Holman there leading about half your DBs who return. This is where the rubber meets the road here. Has your recruiting, since you've been able to prove it on the field, been worthy of those first couple of really good classes?
Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see.
So let's take a look then at our conference standings and our conference strength, and let's go see how that stacks up. We start off with our average SP plus, and the Sooner slots in at number 9 there, in between the Heart North and the North Star there. Perfectly interplaced between the two, 1/3 of a point between both of them, actually, which that rarely ever happens. On the standard deviation side, because of the fact that you've got these really front-running teams like Texas Wesleyan, Ottawa, SAGU, Louisiana Christian's right there, and you've got some teams that are building their programs up with newer coaches like Texas College, Arkansas Baptist. You've got a very disparate standard deviation, top to bottom. They're very spread out. So what does this mean? Unfortunately, this puts the Sooner at the bottom of the conference strength so far. Also, with them kind of getting in the middle there in SP+, kind of shakes up some of the top half a little bit, where instead of a 3-way tie, you've got a 5-way tie, or a 3 2-way ties. Sorry, I can't math today. But the top 2 remain unchanged with the Mid-South and the Frontier. And now, what you've all been waiting for are picks. And I'll go first here. I think that having a chip on your shoulder is definitely something that can motivate you all year long, and it's something that you can sell. And I think the coaching staff at Texas Wesleyan knows what they have to do to get over the hump. Coach Prudhomme over there is scheduling hard. Playing teams where if you lose, and you shoot yourself in the foot for the playoffs. But if you win, man, then you're almost a shoo-in. And especially with a 20-team playoff now, playing those tough teams, I think, is going to give you a nice advantage to get in where there may be a couple more at-large bids. For my dark horse, I'm taking the dark horse who everyone is saying is a dark horse. That's Louisiana Christian. When even the teams in your own conference overlook you, that's definitely, to me, the definition of a dark horse. John agrees with me here on the winner. He's taking Tex West. He's going to take OPSU to make some noise here this year. Matt, what you got?
So I was so off the wall with our North Star episode. I had to rein it back in a little bit. So I think we're giving Ottawa some bulletin board material here. I'm going with Texas Wesleyan to win the conference this year. I just think with the positive momentum they have going, like you said, the chip on their shoulder cannot be forgotten about for this squad. I really do think they get the ball rolling, even with the pieces that they're missing. They'll be able to fill, and this coaching staff has done a phenomenal job with this team in recent years. And for dark horse, I'm also going Louisiana Christian. You just look at the production from last year they have coming back. They're probably the most complete roster compared from last year to this year in terms of who they return. There's so many pieces back for them on a squad that was already successful. I just think it's building to something special for them. And I think this is the year that if they're going to knock somebody off and do something crazy to put themselves on the map, it's this one.
I definitely agree there. And yes, are we giving the Spirits and bulletin board material? Sure. But, I mean, we've always been good for some bulletin board material, let's be honest. That's what we're here for. But, I love the folks that I am here for, and that is our patrons. These are the guys and gals that we depend on month in, month out to make sure that we're able to give you the best coverage. If you want to join this list of folks and help us to promote the NAIA as a league, please go to patreon.com/NAIAFBall. Only ask for $1 a month, and definitely consider joining. Our folks here are DSU Cone, Darren, Bob Boone, Roger Meyer, Jeremy Vauble, Shirley Labella, Fred Christensen, Jerry Quickle, Ace Wellen, Marty Siebel, Justin Cobb, Nick Ryan, Hayden Ferrigno, Kyle Gregory, Jason Crawford, Ryan, Dylan Gonzalez, Nathan Moore, Dale Norton, Tim Burrow, Julie Lout, Stephen Cutler, Nate Soapbeer, Julianne Shager, Brian Shake, Steve Speakman, Justin Hoffman, and Tyler Pierce. Next week, we tape our next one. We get through the conferences. We end up farthest away from you, closest to me, the Sun Conference. The Sun takes us home. Then we've got a great treat that we'll be recording this week and releasing as well, a conversation with the home office in Kansas City, talking about the state of NAIA football, both the conventional men's game and the women's flag game, and just talking about what to expect coming up from the NAIA, how excited they are about these new playoffs, and what they see going into the future of our league. We're almost there. We are almost there. The Hall of Fame game was last week. We've got preseason NFL coming. We've got, of course, more conference realignment in FBS than you can shake a stick at. You can tell it is, everyone wants some football. It is almost time.
We're so close.
So keep it locked here for all your NAIA coverage. For Matt Schwartzler, I am Cory Thorpe, and we are signing off. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the NAIAFBALL podcast, powered by AdCraft USA. Be sure to contact them for all your custom apparel, merch, and uniform needs. Thanks also to our newest sponsor, Telemetry Sports. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to the podcast and to our YouTube channel, and leave us a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. As always, if you'd like to support what we do, head over to patreon.com/NAIAFBall and become a patron. We can't do what we do without our sponsors and listeners like you.